book called Princess Mononoke, How the Film Was Conceived. It's written inside this book, and this is actually... the book is like a summary of the documentary show of the same title produced by Nihon TV. The documentary is also on DVD. There, you see storyboards and manuscripts on Miyazaki's desk, but also numerous memos pasted around the desk. And because those memos are so interesting, the shooting crew tries to record them one after another. And one of the memos mentioned the settings of Eboshi, a woman who escaped from a pungent and hard past. She's sold to a foreign country and becomes a wife of a Wako pirate chief. Wako, which is the opposite of Genko, were Japanese pirates who attacked Chinese and Korean coasts. Well, some history books say they're not really Japanese but Chinese or Korean people who pretended to be Japanese. But anyway, they were called Wako. But anyway, she becomes a wife of one of their chiefs. And she gradually starts showing her leaderships, kills her husband, steals valuables, and brings them back home. And when she comes back, she obtains Ishibiya, which is the newest weapon from Ming or later China, and brings it into Japan. And those are the settings of Lady Eboshi. The important point is that she's once an unfortunate woman who is sold abroad. However, she steps up by becoming a wife of Wako leader. It means not only she's beautiful, but she's also a real go-getter. She's an unbelievable woman who climbs her ladder of success, finally kills her chief of pirates, steals money from Wako, plus steals China's latest cannon Ishibiya and brings it back to Japan. And she's planning to leave the rule of samurai and make a country of mighty ideals. The forest of the forest spirit draws her attention because it belongs to no one, which suits her need. During that time, most of the lands were owned by either the emperor, samurais, or Buddhist temples. But this forest belonged to the forest spirit. The memo says, if I obtain this forest, I can make my own country. If you read this much, doesn't Eboshi start looking like a person of justice? Indeed, she does many good things in the movie, like adopting women who have been sold, or caring for those who have been discriminated because of their Hansen disease, and even giving them jobs. So she does look like a nice person, but she's full of contradiction which keeps her away from being just a good person. For example, what I noticed first was the fact that there are no children in Iron Town. Do you remember how in Miyazaki's films, there are many villages such as the Valley of the Wind in Nausicaa or the Slug Valley in Castle in the Sky? There you can always see kids running around outside. However, there is no kid running around in Iron Town. Not only that, there is not a single baby held by their mothers. About this, Miyazaki himself explained in the pamphlet of Princess Mononoke. Oh, I just didn't have time to draw them. But speaking of not having time, he must have been a lot busier when he was making Castle in the Sky or Nausicaa. There's a reason for not depicting children. It's because Iron Town is a settlement. Settlements were villages that existed in 18th and 19th century in the pioneer days in America. They became villages only 5 or 10 years ago during the pioneer days and were always in combat with the surroundings. Iron Town accepts those who have lost their families or women who have been sold by their parents. But they can't afford to accommodate children and elders who couldn't work. There is not enough food in the first place, and since it's settlement, they can't feed anyone who can't work. In the outskirts of Iron Town is an area where people with Hansen disease live in isolation. They are kept there because they have an ability to make Ishibiya. Thus, it's relatively harsh environment for weak people. But considering that some of the people living in Iron Town are married, shouldn't there also be children? But I assume that there's also a very strict rule on birth control that says they can't have any children. I think Eboshi intentionally creates this dominant culture in Iron Town where women make fun of men and say they are stronger for the same reason. She's being very careful not to let the population increase without a plan until the village becomes bigger and the quality of life improves or the lives of the people become easier. And so, this is the first discrepancy of why Lady Eboshi doesn't look like a nice person. Another thing that concerned me was her cold attitudes. Eboshi makes her first appearance at a scene where she returns home with Iron Town's cowherds after buying rice. Cowherd was an occupation for hinin or outcasts of ancient Japan that set hierarchy in the order of samurais, farmers, craftsmen, and merchants, eta and hinin, although some say this hierarchical order is actually a creation in Meiji era. But so you see how the cowherds are pulling the cows to carry straw rice bags on them. If you think about it, this village is quite rich. It's actually pretty amazing how everyone in the village eats rice. But anyway, during this trip, where they were coming back from buying rice, the caravan gets attacked by Japanese wolves. The attack leads into a battle, and Muro, the leader of the Japanese wolves, he gets shot by Eboshi's Ishibiya, gets injured, and falls off the cliff. And when that happens, how should I call them? Colleagues, followers, the cows, and the cowherds also fall to the bottoms of the cliff, and there are many of them. And when that happens, this man Gonza, who is standing next to Eboshi, and he apparently has been a subordinate of Eboshi since she was a wife of the Wako pirate. So Gonza asks her, what shall we do? But Eboshi just says, we will depart soon. When Gonza asks, what about the men who were pushed over the cliff? She intentionally ignores it and gives an order to the caravan, reorganize the line. But some of those who fell off are still alive, or at least there is a chance. This indicates the severe fact that Iron Town cannot afford to take care of those who may survive, but may become handicapped and lose abilities to work. That's why Eboshi leaves them to die without hesitation. On the other hand, Eboshi is extremely careful not to let anyone realize that she is actually a cold, hard-headed person. That's why when Kuroku, one of the cowherds who fell off the cliff, was saved by Ashitaka and brought back to the village, Eboshi overreacted and said, "Kuroku, I'm happy you're back and I apologize," as if to say she remembers the name of all ox drivers. But even though she seems apologetic in this scene, she will probably abandon him without any hesitation if they encounter the same situation. On top of that, during the climax scene where they hunt the forest spirit, she attracts the wild boars to a location where she hides bombs underground to kill them at once. As you can see the huge explosion here. This is Gonza and Eboshi who are looking down at the scene of bombing. See how we can't see their eyes? And this is their tactic to bond the wild boars by attracting them to a mined field. When they do that, they deploy their subordinates, like the cowherds near there. As they bond the boars who charge toward the mine field, those people also receive the explosion, and the huge dead bodies of the boars fall on top of them, which pretty much kill all of them. Later, there's a very tragic scene where Ashitaka finds one of the survivors covering his face, crying, while the dead bodies in heaps surround him. Just like that, Eboshi does not hesitate to sacrifice her subordinates as a bait as one of her options. That's how she can stay cool and objective when something like that actually happens. So, we can say that there are two sides to who she is. She can definitely be a good leader who is extremely intelligent and kind, but at the same time she can be a cold leader who doesn't mind sacrificing her own people to fulfill her purposes. She's portrayed as a person who obtains these two sides. I think Eboshi has a model. I think it's this person, Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong was a leader with enormous charisma and thorough rationality who relentlessly pursued cultural revolution that was filled with destructions and slaughters, but at the same time made endless efforts to improve the lives of the farmers. And the reason why he's the model of eboshi is because Mao was someone who declared, in 15 years, China will overtake the United Kingdom, who was the world leader in steel industry at the time. To do that, Mao tried to make an iron town or steel mill in every Chinese village and teach the farmers steel making. By doing so, Mao attempted to improve the productivity of iron in China drastically. Well, although the end result was a huge failure. I think Miyazaki took such history of Mao into account and portrayed the community of Iron Town in Princess Mononoke as a kind of communist utopia. Miyazaki spent all his youth, from his late teenage to early 30s, longing for communism. Of course, the brutality and the problems of Mao Zedong and the organization and guidance department of the Communist Party of China have been fully revealed by now. However, Miyazaki, as a so-called old leftist, thinks that he's not a superficial man who would easily turn his back on something he has once believed and go, well, communism was a mistake, the Communist Party of China was wrong. He rather thinks that if communism was a mistake, it's more important that he inspects why did such mistake happen inside of me, and he would cling on to the issue until the inspection ends. So, my theory is that the image of eboshi is inspired by Mao Zedong in his youth, but she was depicted as a woman of great beauty. So again, eboshi is sold by a slave dealer, becomes a wife of a Wako pirate, but later kills the leader, steals an advanced technology from Ming and tries to make an independent country in Japan. In other words, she's a revolutionist as well as a terrorist. For her, both kings and gods are nothing but obstacles. Mao Zedong himself said religion is an opium, and denied religion or even the existence of a god. Likewise to eboshi, the forest spirit is nothing more than a giant creature, and even though the imperial family claims we come of a family of the gods, they are mere politicians. I believe eboshi thinks we need neither for my ideal country. In my country, everyone is equal, and our lives will be put together rationally. Not only that, she's armed with a thoroughly logical mind. I'm not gonna deal with such superstitious nonsense. She's also literally armed, so she's a real terrorist. And I see this theory time to time on the internet. I also question, isn't eboshi and son mother and daughter? Well, people who write something similar on the internet all say, although there's no evidence, and I don't have any proof either. Because Miyazaki himself has never mentioned any of that. In fact, I thought maybe Suzuki-san has said something carelessly since he's chit-chatty. So I looked up most of his remarks, but I couldn't find a single word of evidence. However, although there's no evidence, there are things that are unnatural. If you see the settings of San's upbringing, it only says she was abandoned as a scapegoat by a human who has offended the forest. That's all there is for the official setting. As I said a little while ago, even a side character like eboshi has a setting like she's sold to a foreign country and so on, or Jigo and so many other characters have tons of settings, but somehow San is the only one who has just one line description about who she is. It's too insufficient and unnatural. Moreover, there are many recollection scenes during the movie, but there is none that depicts San as a baby. So I can't help but to think that there must be a reason that only San has such brief setting. And if San is eboshi's daughter, if Princess Mononoke was her daughter, then many things can be explained. For example, if eboshi has a child with the Wako pirate, she must not love the child very much, considering the fact that she becomes his wife and eventually kills him. Well, you might say, no, she's a woman, she must love her own child, but no, eboshi's not a regular woman. She's a female version of Mao Zedong. If we see her as Mao Zedong, we can also think that she feels a bit differently than other ordinary women. And of course, there is no child in Iron Town. As I said before, I think this is because of the strict birth control. If eboshi made all villagers know that their leader abandoned or lost her own precious child, it's easier for me to understand and everything makes sense clearly why everyone in the village is convinced by the rule that they can't make a child. It also gets easier to understand that Moro, the foster parent, and Eboshi, the true parent, hate each other so strongly if we think Eboshi and San are a mother-daughter relationship. I mean, in the first half, Moro is shot and injured by Eboshi, but until then, there should be no reason for Moro to have a strong personal grudge against Eboshi. However, both of them have that much grudge against each other by name. Moro is saying that the fight is not over until I bite Eboshi to death. So no matter how you look at it, it's a personal grudge against Eboshi. As for Eboshi, it appears as a precise symbol of her own guilt that a Japanese wolf called Moro is raising her own child that she abandoned. Every time she sees her daughter, who was raised by a Japanese dog, no matter how much she thought that San is no longer her child, she can't help feeling guilty. I've always wondered if the red pattern on San's face in a tattoo, who put it in for what purpose? One interpretation is to think when San grew up, she put it in by herself as a sign of determination that she was no longer a human being, so would never shed tears again. I also kind of think, actually, it may have been put in by whoever abandoned her to indicate that she was no longer a human. Anyway, the emotions between Moro and Eboshi can be explained well. What should I say? If we focus on the mother and daughter relationship between San and Eboshi.